Hi there, it's William Angel here, and welcome back to my review of the third season of The Simpsons. We have 24 episodes to look at this time, which is the most at this point to date in a season. So it should keep me on my toes if nothing else. I am looking forward to reviewing this one simply because this is where most people consider like the classic era of a show starts, and to be honest, I'm in that mold as well. I remember season 3 to be the first season where it really starts getting to the gold of The Simpsons, which we all know and love. And on reflection, I am looking forward to seeing just how it stacks up. So, as usual, I'll review every one of the episodes, giving it a rating, and at the end I'll discuss my overall score and thoughts for the season, and see if it lives up to its classic reputation. As usual, I would like to thank the Simpsons Wiki for helping with the information. That really is good stuff on that website. Any Simpsons fan who needs to know, information about the show, that really is a place to go. Now, without further ado, let's get on to the episode, shall we? Season 3, Episode 1, Stark Raving Dad. After Bart leaves his lucky red hat in a pile of washing, Homer wears a pink shirt to a nuclear power plant. He is then committed to a mental institution where he meets a man claiming to be Michael Jackson. Some trivia for this one is that we see that Lisa turns 8 in this episode. She was actually 7 for the first 2 seasons, but has been 8 ever since this episode. The best moment for me was Bart's birthday song for Lisa at the end. That is just a nice touching moment. Now, before we actually get on to discussing this episode and what I think of it in a vacuum, I do want to address the elephant in the room, which is the obvious controversy surrounding this episode's featuring of Michael Jackson. Ever since the Leaving Neverland documentary, obviously there's been big talk of Michael Jackson being accused of pedophilia. I mean, the accusations had been there for decades, but this is, I guess, brought into the spotlight again, and everyone was talking about it when the documentary came out. And in regards to this episode, the writers decided that they didn't want this episode to be shown anymore, and they kind of wanted it to be taken out of circulation, so this episode will not air anymore or anything like that. And to be honest, my opinion about that is that I don't necessarily agree with trying to scrub entertainment content out of existence just because there may be a bad guy featured in it. I don't think that is really helpful. I don't really think that serves any point. But saying that, I can see where the writers are coming from in not wanting, their product, their episode to be associated with these type of allegations. So I don't really agree with their decision, but I can see where they're coming from. I'm not going to get into my opinion on Michael Jackson and whether I think he did or didn't do it because that's kind of irrelevant, to be honest, and obviously I don't know for sure. No one knows for sure, so it's not really worth me saying. But yeah, I did want to address that point when discussing this episode because it kind of goes hand in hand with this episode now, unfortunately. So there we go. Now, onto a more positive side of things, what is my thoughts on this episode? I do like it, and it gets a 4 out of 5 from me. If nothing else, I think I like this one just for how creative it is. It does deserve a lot of credit for that. I mean, how many other shows would create a unique, interesting character for a mega famous star to play? Most shows would just be content with like riding that star power just for views and milking it, but The Simpsons didn't on this occasion. I think that shows how special the show was at this point in time. Even modern Simpsons suffers a lot from having famous guest stars just on for the sake of having them, so I'm glad this episode has a bit more respect for its audience. I must admit though, I do not find it the most funniest episode in all of the world, but the whole concept of just seeing the town of Springfield react to Jackson Mania, it really does give you a hint of what it was like at that time. And that side of things is fun enough by itself really. As I mentioned before, that ending is my favourite part of it all. It caps it off really well and shows that this season will still bring plenty of heart to the table. Season 3, Episode 2, Mr. Lisa Goes to Washington. When Lisa's patriotic essay wins the contest, the Simpsons win a trip to Washington, D.C. However, Lisa's faith in democracy is soon shaken. Some trivia is that the plot and the title of this episode is a reference to Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. The best moment was the scene where Lisa discovers the corrupt politician taking a bribe. That is a turning point of the story and it really is done well. So do I think that this episode is corrupt, like Washington DC? No, I don't. I do like this episode quite a lot, and for that reason, it gets a 5 out of 5 for me. Obviously, it goes for the political satire angle, pointing out the corruption that is in governments, and it is shown in a simple way, but it does get the point across well enough. I also like the bit at the end where it is recognised that the right to point out corruption is in itself a freedom that not everyone has the luxury of. Aside from that, there's also quite a few nice character moments, mainly with Lisa of course, as she struggles with what she sees, but there are also good moments with Homer early on, with his new magazine. The jokes complement the story pretty well as well. I really love Homer's "give her the check" line that he shouts out during Lisa's presentation at the end. I laugh every single time I hear that. It is very much deserving of its 5 out of 5 rating for me. Season 3, Episode 3, When Flanders Failed. When Ned Flanders announces that he is starting his own store, catering to the left-handed, Homer wishes that his business will fail. Something that you will notice if you look closely enough at this episode is that you can see various leftover Season 1 characters appear at Ned's barbecue, and they are never seen again after this episode. What a weird circle of friends Ned must have. The best moment for me was Homer laughing, then choking on a burger. The rating this one gets is a 4 out of 5. The main plot is pretty simple. It's mostly just Flanders opening a leftorium and Homer wanting it to fail. You see various thought bubbles of Homer which are quite funny, and you see Ned just announce it at the barbecue, and the next thing you know, it's at a shop in the mall, which is interesting to say the least, and probably says something about Ned's business skills. I would say though that Homer probably does slip into jerk-ass territory a bit too much for my liking, and there is no justification given for him doing it. He does of course come around in the end though. I just didn't really feel like the episode earned that moment as well as it should have done. When he finally does tell the town about the store, of course Ned suddenly has loads of customers and gets away with being a bad businessman. Don't get me wrong, the plot is not terrible or anything, but it does have a few flaws that make me scratch my head a bit. The subplot here has Bart learning karate, which is pretty fun. Watching him wind up Lisa with a touch of death is very simple but makes for some good viewing. There are also some good jokes here, like Homer's evil laugh and the "just stamp the ticket man," which helps my enjoyment of the episode overall. Season 3, Episode 4, Bart the Murderer. Bart accidentally stumbles into a mob's hideout and soon becomes their bartender, but when he shows up late and blames Principal Skinner, they confront Skinner. The next day, Bart discovers that he is missing. Some trivia is that all of the horses in the third race at the Shelbyville Downs are named after famous cartoon phrases. The best moment was all of Fat Tony's gang's interactions with Bart. I don't know why, but they just gel together so well for me. The score for this one is another 5 out of 5. Yeah, I do like this one quite a lot. It takes time at the start to establish Bart's bad day, and quickly develops into his relationship with the mob. Seeing the mob in action is good stuff by itself. No wonder that they keep bringing Fat Tony back in so many future episodes. He hit it off straight away here, and he has a certain amount of charisma to him. Once Skinner goes missing, it is interesting to see how the plot progresses. The way in which everyone blames Bart in court is very funny. Seeing even Homer sailing down the river is quite funny, to say the least. Skinner suddenly bursting into the courtroom to tell his rather implausible story also works well for me. It is just so stupid and random that I just can't help loving it. It is very cheesy for sure, but I don't know, I just have a soft spot for it. Adds to that rather unique plot, some good jokes across the board, and you have yourself a classic episode, in my opinion. Season 3, Episode 5, Homer Defined. During a meltdown at the nuclear power plant, Homer luckily pushes the right button to save the day. However, he soon begins to worry that he will be found out as a fraud. So, basketball player Magic Johnson guest stars in this episode, becoming the first professional athlete to appear on the show. And believe me, we will be seeing plenty more of them later in the season. Best moment for me were the scenes showing how the town reacts to the meltdown threat. Seeing them all panic in their own different ways is very amusing to me. This is a 4 out of 5 from me. Well, this was about as high stakes as The Simpsons get, and although I guess it was kind of inevitable that Homer would have to deal with a nuclear meltdown at some point, it does suit his character that he simply gets lucky and succeeds anyway. He does love to pull a Homer after all. Speaking of that, I love the various dictionary references that appear throughout the episode. It just adds to the story really well. I think the best part of the whole plot is just being able to see the ride that Homer goes on rising up the ranks in the power plant, even if he feels undeserving of it. The ending, even if it is very coincidental, is still good having Homer in a dictionary as an apt way to end. The Bart Milhouse story is another solid side plot. It's good to see a different caring side of Bart as he misses his friendship and the impact that has on him. Overall, this is good, but I would not say it's funny enough to be called like an all-time classic or anything. Season 3, Episode 6, Like Father, Like Clown. After finding out that Krusty is Jewish, Bart and Lisa vow to reunite him with his estranged father, Rabbi Krustofsky. So, this episode can be viewed as a rare sequel for the show. This is because footage from Krusty Gets Busted is used in this one. The best moment was seeing how Krusty acts behind the scenes of his show for the first time. It really is nice getting more of an insight into his character. So do I find this episode as funny as Krusty's show? Well, yeah, I probably do, really. It's only a 2 out of 5 from me. Now, maybe I am being a bit harsh with this rating, but I just could not get into this one. On paper, it might seem a good idea to flesh out Krusty's background character a bit more, and it is to an extent, but I just find it's not really executed that well. The episode quickly becomes stale for me, and seeing Bart and Lisa keep failing to reunite Krusty with his father drags even more. The ending payoff that we get is okay, but even that is a bit sappy and predictable for my liking. From my experience, there are hardly any jokes told at all in the whole episode, which really could have done with them to make it less boring to sit through. So yeah, I can see why some people would like this, but I just never got into it, so I have to put it as a 2, unfortunately. Season 3, Episode 7, Treehouse of Horror 2. The 3 spooky tales in this one are The Monkey's Paw, The Bart Zone, and If I Only Had a Brain. So some trivia here is that this is the first Treehouse of Horror episode to have the cast names changed to Halloween puns. Example, Bat Groening, James Hell Brooks. My best moment was Kang and Kodos conquering the world with clubs and a slingshot. So this special was a 5 out of 5 for me. This was the first classic Treehouse of Horror episode in my opinion. Lisa's Dream was the first part and also the best one. It contained a lot of fun jokes and moments. The idea of a magic hand giving cursed wishes is cliché, but it still works well. I also love how it works perfectly for Flanders at the end. To add to all this, they also managed to get in a few references in on how Simpsons mania was rife at the time. Bart's dream was also good for what it was. It's nice to get a small glimpse of what Bart having magical powers would look like. The ending with Bart waking up screaming after making up with Homer was also a funny surprise. Out of all things, it is making up with his dad that forces him to have a nightmare. That's just funny. Homer's Dream was probably the weakest of the 3 segments for me, but it was still decent. I liked Mr. Burns' "It's not rocket science, it's brain surgery" line, as well as the twist ending. Season 3, Episode 8, Lisa's Pony. To make up for failing to get Lisa a saxophone read in time for the school talent show, Homer decides to buy her a pony. The trivia for this one is that the scene when Lisa finds the horse's head in her bed and screams is a reference to The Godfather. The best moment for me was seeing Homer work at the Quickie Mart. All of those scenes just land. As far as my rating for this one, I give it a 4 out of 5. So, at the episode's core, it is a relationship between Homer and Lisa, and for the most part it handles that pretty well. Homer's more neglectful side is shown early on, but in contrast to that, seeing how he works hard to make Lisa happy is a great characterization for him. Lisa gets her moment to shine too when she decides to give up Princess for the sake of Homer, and that is a nice scene that was well earned by all the build-up that the episode put into it. The whole idea of buying a pony to win Lisa's love in the first place is not that impactful though, and I do find the actual scenes involving the pony to be lackluster. There are a lot of good jokes to make up for that minor gripe though, such as the kid singing about his dingaling and the automatic door closing on Homer's head. Season 3, Episode 9, Saturdays of Thunder. Bart becomes interested in soapbox racing and soon finds himself competing against Martin and Nelson. This episode's title is a reference to the racing movie Days of Thunder. The best moment was the final race between Bart and Nelson. So this is a solid episode, and as such it gets a solid rating of 4 out of 5. I did find myself debating a bit actually, whether I wanted to give this one a 4 out of 5, but in the end I think there was enough good stuff to make this one very enjoyable. It just didn't quite have that style quality to give it a 5. The Homer and Bart story was okay, but it just did not have that much impact for me, as it has been done better in the show many times before and after this. The soapbox derby races, on the other hand, were very entertaining. I like the designs of the carts, especially the honour roller designed by Martin. Speaking of Martin, I found his characterization to be great here in general. It's maybe the best he was ever written for the show, as he's still that smart geeky kid, but also has a more fun, wild side to him. As far as the jokes go, they were okay. I found a few of them to be better early on, and they petered out towards the end a bit. So yeah, in all this is a solid episode. Well, at least as solid as one can be when it contains Bill Cosby saving the Simpsons. Season 3, Episode 10, Flaming Moe's. Homer shows Moe how to make a new drink. However, it is so good that he steals the recipe and takes all of the credit. So some trivia is that the song at Flaming Moe's, as well as the waitress that Moe hires, are both a parody of the sitcom Cheers. The best moment was Homer's sarcastic rant to Marge. So straight in here with a 5 out of 5. This is a true classic and, for my money, one of the best episodes of a show of all time. It would probably be in my top 5, but definitely my top 10 for sure. Everything it tries comes off right from the start with the build-up of how Homer discovered the drink, through to all the crazy popularity that Moe gets from stealing the recipe. The jokes kept on coming here, with great ones like Bart's prank call backfiring, and Moe's "You can use it" line to Homer. There were even two magnificent songs to boot, one from Aerosmith and another catchy original one. Once we reach Act 3, that is really where it starts to get interesting. To see Homer's descent into madness, and the way in which he reveals the secret ingredient to everyone is just as funny as you would expect it to be. The ending with Moe and Homer making up is also simple but golden. So yeah, I've seen this episode so many times over the years and I just never get tired of it. It is that great. Season 3, Episode 11, Burns, Verkraften, to Kraftwerk. Mr. Burns sells a nuclear power plant to German businessmen for $100 million. As a result, Homer loses his job and falls into a state of depression. So, some trivia here is that since Phil Hartman understood the German language, he actually helped the writers with some of the conversations. The best moment for me was the Land of Chocolate sequence. That is just iconic for a reason. So, this gets a 5 out of 5 rating. I think that the main reason why I love this episode so much is because it is among the funniest of the season. There were lots of great moments, such as the Land of Chocolate and the scenes at Moe's with Bart. The way in which the episode flows can be uneven at times, with Mr. Burns both selling the plant, then rebuying it at the end, both kind of come out of nowhere. And so does him rehiring Homer at the end for that matter. We are still waiting for that sword of Damocles to fall, by the way. What is done well, however, is the way in which we get to see Mr. Burns in a different light. Him find out that his money is no fun without having the power is a smart turn for his character. The scenes with the Simpsons family trying to save money are also good, even if they didn't spend too much time on it. So yeah, this episode just has a lot of little clever moments and sequences which really make it enjoyable. Season 3, Episode 12, I Married Marge. In a flashback to 1980, Marge finds out that she is pregnant with Bart, which prompts Homer to propose to her. So some trivia not really relating to this episode, but relating to history. On the day that this episode premiered, the Soviet Union officially dissolved. My best moment was just seeing Smithers and Dr. Hibbert's shocked reaction to Homer becoming a nuclear technician. So what do I think of this episode? I think it is pretty good. It gets a 4 out of 5. This is the second flashback that the series has had up until this point, and I think this one is slightly better than the first. Mainly because I just appreciated that they decided to add in a lot more humour this time. Obviously seeing how Homer and Marge got married, and then how Bart was good stuff, and needed to be shown at some point. In fact, Homer in this episode is portrayed very well. He's still an idiot who stumbles into his job because of Mr. Burns' weird ways, but he is shown as someone who wants to work hard and to try and help provide for Marge and baby Bart. In fact, the way in which he's willing to help put up with all the abuse from Marge's family and work multiple jobs just because he loves her is really an admirable quality, to say the least. And it's that side of things that make this episode stand out, really. Season 3, Episode 13, Radio Bart. Bart gets a radio microphone for his birthday, which he uses to trick the town. However, things soon get out of control. So, some trivia is that this episode parodies various charity singles, including songs like Do They Know It's Christmas and We Are the World. My best moment came when Homer started digging to save Bart, which causes the rest of the town to join in. Another great moment which shows how Homer really cares about his kids. So this is another cult classic, and it does get a 5 out of 5. I feel like the start of this one really helps set the tone, I liked the whole of Act 1. It was almost entirely devoted to Bart's pranks with his new present. It even had a bit of good foreshadowing there, with his present that ends up being his undoing at the end, show up at his birthday party. They actually managed to get a few good moments out of his birthday party, and, in typical Simpsons fashion, they even made a few cynical jabs about how crappy children's birthday parties can be. The main premise of Bart tricking the town is an interesting one, and even if it turns out into a rather predictable Boy Cried Wolf story, they still managed to get some good mileage out of it. It does hit a few good emotional notes as well, in how Bart comes to regret what he did, and how his parents struggle to save him. Add on to that some good jokes like a Lincoln Squirrel and Homer's TV interview, and it helps drag this episode up to be a great one. Season 3, Episode 14, Lisa the Greek. After Homer discovers that Lisa can predict football results, he starts placing bets based on Lisa's predictions. So, Euglin and Caesar from the Creeps of Wrath actually make a cameo appearance here. They are seen watching TV in an apartment just by the Eiffel Tower. The best moment was Moe trying to get out of taking bets with Homer. For me, I decided to give this one a 3 out of 5. So, we have another Lisa and Homer episode, eh? The show really did learn to love that pairing early on. This time, however, as the rating suggests, I don't think it was quite as successful as previous attempts. Sure, it is a decent episode, but the whole premise that their relationship was based on Lisa picking the right team every time is a bit silly. Not to mention the climax of Lisa's subconscious maybe making her tell Homer the wrong team to get back at him is just overdramatic and contrived as hell. So because of that, the whole ending section never really had any impact on me. I don't think it helps either that I'm not into American football, so that side of things never really clicked for me, but I can see how fans of it would like some of the references. The jokes were not that great either, in my opinion, but I did enjoy the brief side plot of seeing Bart and Marge spend time together. We don't see that dynamic too often, and it worked well here for the brief screen time that it got. Season 3, Episode 15, Homer Alone. After stress causes Marge to break down, she takes a vacation at Rancho Relaxo, leaving the family to take care of themselves. Some trivia here is that the opening scene of the episode is a parody of the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote classic chase scenes from Looney Tunes. My best moment was the Mayor Quimby and Chief Wiggum argument. It is a shame really that we didn't get more of that type of dynamic as the series went on, because I find that those two characters do gel together, especially when they're clashing like that. So, this was similar to the last episode for me. It was solid but unspectacular, and for that reason it gets the exact same rating, of a 3 out of 5. This episode is mostly designed to show what Marge does for the family, and in that it does accomplish it pretty well. Seeing Marge break down on the highway in a car under stress is a memorable moment really, and it makes sense with Marge's character, given how she is constantly shown as someone who will suppress her emotions until they burst. Once she gets to Rancho Relaxo, the scenes there are pretty decent, and Lisa and Bart at Paddy and Selma's are also good, and they give a few good jokes and moments about how bad it would be to actually live with those two. I am more mixed at Homer losing Maggie, however. He kind of comes out of nowhere, and that plot point has no real payoff. It feels like a cheap way to me to try and up the stakes towards the end of the episode. To sum this episode up, it does a lot of things well, with none of them really being spectacular, and the final act did leave me a bit disappointed. Season 3, Episode 16, Bart the Lover. Bart starts a practical joke on Mrs. Krabappel, but he soon starts to regret his actions. Meanwhile, Homer tries to give up swearing. So, the picture that Bart sends Edna is of ice hockey star Geordie Howe. The writers originally wanted to use Johnny Unitas, but could not get the rights to use his image. The best moment was Homer kicking down the doghouse that he built in a rage. No questions asked, all day long, this is a 5 out of 5. Yeah, I really like this episode. I find that it strikes the perfect balance between comedy and emotion, as well as between the main and subplots. Having Bart play a prank on his teacher is very natural for him, and of course he would not think about the possible consequences of doing that. When he does find out about how lonely Mrs. Krabappel is, and how his prank upsets her even more, he feels guilty and tries to make up for it. I think that also fits into his character well. Another character that they get right is Mrs. K herself. She's very sympathetic here, and by the end of it you kinda just want her to have a happy ending, which is why it works so well when she does get it. In addition to that, the subplot is great and produces a lot of good jokes, with Homer and his swear jar. All things considered, I like this episode and I think it's a bit of an underappreciated gem for this series in all honesty. Season 3, Episode 17, Homer at the Bat. Homer signs up for the planned softball team, but in order to win a $1 million bet, Mr. Burns hires professional baseball players to play instead. So, some trivia is that Bart and Lisa chanting, "Darryl, Darryl, Darryl," is a reference to a real-life game in the 1986 World Series, where fans did chant that at Darryl Strawberry. The best moment was Mr. Burns' delusional management skills, if you could call them skills. I really did like that whole section. So, one classic to another classic. That's right, this is another 5 out of 5 score. Now, to preface my thoughts on this episode, I'm not a fan of baseball or softball, so the fact that I love this so much probably tells you all you need to know. Indeed, I don't think you need to be a fan of either sport to get the enjoyment out of this one. The whole plot is set up just to be a farce of wacky and unpredictable plot points. The best thing that you can do is just strap in and go along for the ride. It starts out as just a bunch of guys playing for their place of work against other local organisations, which is a very grassroots and relatable type of thing. But from that, it soon develops to the complete opposite extreme, to focus on billionaires making massive bets and a bunch of baseball celebrities. I love the way in which the show mocks the concept that it sets up, by picking them off one by one in outrageous ways. I also love how it ends, with Mr. Burns calling Homer up instead of Darryl Strawberry, and he ends up pulling a Homer and succeeding anyway. This is just one of the funniest episodes in the show's history for me, with crackers like Lord Palmerston and Don Mattingly's sideburns, as well as the aforementioned Mr. Burns' tactics. Just a classic, I would recommend anyone to watch this. Season 3, Episode 18, Separate Vocations. After taking a career aptitude test, Lisa finds out that she is suited to be a homemaker, while Bart is more suited to be a police officer. And while Bart enjoys his new taste of authority, Lisa struggles with the outcome of the test. Some trivia is that Nancy Cartwright actually won an Emmy for her performance as Bart in this episode. And the best moment was Bart spending the night as a police officer. So this gets a 3 out of 5 from me. And I do have very mixed feelings about this one. It excels when it shows Bart and Lisa in opposite roles to what we used to see, and having them both clash towards the end is a clever direction to take. I must say that I did enjoy Bart's side of things more. Just seeing him as an authority figure is a nice change of pace. Lisa's story is so-so. It's not bad, but we've seen the same kind of story about her being depressed so many times now, and this was not one of the better portrayals. The ending is a weird one for me, as it is both good and bad in its own way. On one hand, I like how Bart takes the blame for Lisa, as it shows him as the caring big brother who was the more mature of the two for a change. It really was a nice moment. But also, a part of it just rubs me up the wrong way. Lisa gets away free from any blame, when really she should have taken responsibility. It would not really be a problem so much if it's just this once that it happens, but it is a trend that seems to happen far too often in the show for my liking. The jokes were slightly below par as well for my taste. It did manage a few jabs at the school system though, which I'm always on board with. Season 3, Episode 19, Dog of Death. When Santa's little helper suffers from a twisted stomach, the Simpsons cut corners financially in order to try and pay for a life-saving operation. So, if you pay close attention, you'll find that there are a few callbacks to older episodes here, like Ned wearing his assassin shoes, and Skinner's "Have you seen my body today?" sign from Bart the Murderer. My best moment was Homer's fantasy of him being made of gold after winning the lottery. Look closer, Lenny! So, in terms of the rating I'd give this one, it is a solid 4 out of 5. On the surface, this does not appear to be anything special, just a typical Santa's little helper story of him coming into some trouble, which all works out in the end. That side of things was a bit rushed over, all in all, as the dog being ill never really came into relevance until about a third of the way through, but at least it did produce a nice ending though, with Bart and the dog at least. The jokes that they tell here are really what makes this episode good. There were many memorable lines and sequences, especially early on. I love the whole bit about the lottery, seeing how crazy everyone gets over it, and how Homer in particular gets obsessed by it. Ken Brockman is also great after winning the lottery live on air, and seeing his lifestyle change in the background is a nice subtle touch. I don't have too much else to say about this one, just solid through and through. Season 3, Episode 20, Colonel Homer. After an argument with Marge, Homer drives to a bar, where he discovers a singer named Noreen Lumpkin. Soon he becomes her manager, much to Marge's disgust. So some trivia is that this is the only episode ever of the show written solely by creator Matt Groening. The best moment for me was the ending with Homer reuniting with Marge. So this is another 4 out of 5 from me, and if I had to sum this episode up in one word, it would be solid, or at least as solid as a Homer and Marge marriage crisis episode can be. It's not the funniest episode in existence, but it does focus on having a few bits of observational humour sprinkled throughout. What it does best, though, is its characterization. The obvious example would be Homer and Marge. Their relationship is pretty well done again, and there is a happy ending, which is nice, even if it is a bit predictable. More interestingly, though, I also found Noreen to be an interesting one. I like how she is portrayed as not just a sleazy singer trying to steal Homer, but as someone who has no one there for her. In that way, it is somewhat understandable why she would feel attracted to someone like Homer, who actually appears to care about her and her music, instead of just wanting either her looks or her money, and not really being there for her when her chips were down. So yeah, I don't really have much else to say about this one, just a solid outing all round. Season 3, Episode 21, Black Widower. Sideshow Bob gets paroled from prison and marries Selma. However, Bart suspects that he may be up to something. So some trivia is that Bob's prison number is 24601, the same as Jean Valjean from Les Miserables. The best moment was the whole ending sequence of Bart discovering Bob's plan. So this was an easy 5 out of 5 rating for me to give. I very much have a soft spot for this episode. It is another great Sideshow Bob mystery case. This one again was fun and well foreshadowed. The reveal of Bob's plan was told in a funny way and led to great moments with Bart, Homer and Selma. Bob himself was great as usual. His interactions with Chief Wiggum at the end never failed to make me laugh. Speaking of laughing, the jokes were great too. Some demanding a separation, and Bart trying to explain to Homer are among the best ones for me. Both had me laughing. To go along with all of this, we had the added bonus of it being very well animated. There were good images and even shadows thrown in here to add to the drama, not to mention some of the striking camera angles. When you take everything that this episode had to offer into account, you have yourself an all-time classic for my money. It's kind of a shame in a way though, as I feel like this episode gets overlooked by a lot of people in favour of many other great Sideshow Bob episodes. Season 3, Episode 22, The Otto Show. Otto is fired from his job of driving a school bus and is kicked out of his apartment. He soon goes to live with the Simpsons until he can get his job back. The trivia here is this is the episode where we learn Otto's last name really is Man. The best moment was Otto reading the Maniac bedtime story to Lisa. I just love the sheer terror on Lisa's face when Otto goes, "And that maniac was me!" So, do I think this episode succeeds? Kind of. It does get a 3 out of 5. Well, I guess taking a look at a side character like Otto is pretty interesting for a change, especially as he is someone who does not get much characterization in the show. The story did produce some fun moments. I kind of liked how immature he is portrayed, but you don't get the sense with him that he means to harm people. I also like the ending for him, where he gets his driving license back for no other reason than his shared hatred of Homer with Selma. Succeeding despite incompetence fits so well for this show, as well as Otto's character in general. As far as the jokes go, I must say that they are not the best, but there were a few good ones like the before mentioned Otto scaring Lisa with that bedtime story. So yeah, just a decent but forgettable episode in the end. Season 3, Episode 23. Bart's friend falls in love. Milhouse gets a girlfriend and starts to spend less time with Bart, which causes a strain on their friendship. So, some trivia you may or may not have noticed is that the French national anthem plays when Milhouse and Samantha kiss for the first time. The best moment for me was the Indiana Jones style chase intro. That really is a classic, and is frankly one of 2 classic sequences that we get in this episode, and I'll touch on that in a minute. So, what do I think of Milhouse's Spotlight episode? I think it's a classic, alright. It's a 5 out of 5. For such a simple concept, they make this work surprisingly well. In fact, they do it about as well as I could think of, to be honest. I can't say that I was really that invested in Milhouse's love story, personally, but it does work well in providing a conflict between him and Bart. It is good to see a different side of Bart as well. He is shown to be lost without Milhouse here, and this episode showcases that quite well. Of course, it was never likely that Milhouse and Samantha were going to stay together after this episode, so for that reason the stakes seemed quite low to me, but I did like Milhouse's Romeo and Juliet comment to round it all off. It ended in tragedy indeed. The jokes are pretty solid, as you'd expect from this season, but the best parts of the whole thing for me were the intro Bart and Homer chase scenes, as I mentioned, and the sex ed video. The chase sequence was a lively way to open up, and a great parody to boot, and the dry humour of the sex ed video is a great take on the ones that really are shown in classes. Mrs. Krabappel's "she's faking" is really is the cherry on top, and sells the whole thing so well. So, for those reasons, if nothing else, this episode stands out. Season 3, Episode 24. Brother, can you spare 2 dimes? After learning that Homer came into some money, Herb pays him a visit. To make up for ruining him, Homer borrows him the money to fund an invention that can make Herb rich again. So some trivia here is that Herb gives Homer the mysterious drinking bird, which is seen again in several future episodes. And I'll get on to why it is mysterious in future seasons. Just seeing how Herb's life turned out after his first encounter with Homer was the best moment for me. So, to round off this season, the final rating of the season is a 4 out of 5. I guess Danny DeVito proved so popular as Herb that they just had to bring him back. I don't blame them though, because it was good to see Herb get a satisfying conclusion to his story after the way it ended the last time. To be honest, there was not that much there in terms of the meat of this episode, as most of the time it was spent on Homer getting his $2,000 and deciding what to do with it. I did like the setup to how we got the money though. Mr. Burns setting up a farce of an award show to get out of paying Homer millions was funny to say the least. That part of the episode also produced the most jokes. The one that really stands out to me is Homer's obsession with the drinking bird as Herb is given his presentation. The ending was very status quo, but at least Herb's invention gave Maggie some relevance to the plot for a change, which is always nice to see. So with that, all the episodes are done, and welcome to my Season 3 summary. So the score that I got when I averaged out all of the episodes is a 4.1. And that is very good, believe me. So have over a 4 rating stretched out over an entire season is very good going, and really does show just how classic the season is. My top 5 episodes are as follows. Flaming Moe's takes the top spot, Homer at the Bat gets number 2, Bart the Lover is 3rd, Black Widower is 4th, and Mr. Lisa Goes to Washington gets the 5th place prize. And something different to the previous 2 seasons, for this one I've decided not to work out my bottom 5, as there's just too few bad episodes to really deserve it or merit it. If I was to try and pick my bottom 5, I feel like I would only end up nitpicking the episodes to try and come up with an arbitrary list. But for what it is worth, the worst episode for me is episode 6, Like Father Like Clown. That is the most boring of the season for me, and as such would be the worst of the lot. With that out of the way, my conclusions this season overall are that it does stand the test of time as a true classic of the show, and indeed a classic for television history. It seems to hit that perfect sweet spot of having just the right amount of heart and down-to-earth character moments grounding the plots, as well as having a lot more over-the-top humour being mixed in. Another thing that separates this season from its predecessors is the use of more guest stars and more out-there plots. Sure, we had hints of these kind of things in season 2, but it was taken to a whole nother level entirely here. So yeah, as expected, I very much enjoyed going back to watch this season, and it was a noticeable step up in quality from the already quite good season 2. In fact, rewatching this has only increased my appetite to get onto season 4, which is another classic. It will actually be interesting though to see how that one compares to this. That is all for my thoughts on season 3. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time to go through season 4. Goodbye guys.